This is the Iron Sharpens Iron Movement, sharing insights into the power of people-centric leading.
Hi, this is Jim, and today we welcome to our tribe a senior executive that in 2019 had burnout and it put a brake on his career. Determined to make this an opportunity, though, he trained in neuroscience and conceived a new form of leadership that focused on whole brain leading. He created his company, Superhumain, to promote a humanistic and innovative managerial approach to see with new eyes to redesign work. This is Alan Caugant. Iron Sharpens Iron Movement is brought to you by N2 Growth, a leader in executive search, leadership development, and talent management. We find and develop the world's best leaders. Learn more about our practice by visiting us at n2growth.com or click on the link in the show notes of this podcast. Alan, welcome to the Iron Sharpens Iron Movement. I know everybody's excited today to kind of get some insights into the superhuman mindset that you have discovered and really dig deep into the whole brain leadership side of the house, because it's a huge topic that's starting to become more and more relevant, and you are on the leading edge of truly understanding this. So welcome to the movement.
Thank you so much for the invitation, and I'm very pleased to be with you tonight for me and the morning for you.
And for all of us out there, as a reminder, I know we read the bio on where Alan's at, but you are coming to us from France. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. In southeast France, Lyon.
Lyon, beautiful, beautiful country there, and we appreciate the time that you're taking to educate the audience. You know, Alan, we've had these discussions in the past about how the world's always moving, at a quick pace, but now more than ever, it's impacting all industries. It's moving so fast. We're in faster times than have ever been in our history as leaders and as human beings. And it really has affected you too. You were a successful senior executive for over 15 years, and you found yourself caught up in this VUCA world, and you fell into a sense of burnout.
No, you're right. Definitively, the complexity of today's disruption is clearly challenging us. CEOs, leaders, managers, anyone. And I've been through this painful personal experience as well through my burnout. My burnout rises from an extended, repeated, and excessive amount of stress, but my body tries to adapt to until it reaches its limit. My brain goes on strike, and by stopping functioning and the next morning. So it was quite tough. And I've tried to analyze myself. Okay, what went wrong? And I could foresee that the loss of meaning in my daily activity, be it professional or personal, as well as mismatch between our personal values or those in our environment, can cause the stress drivers. And also during that time, I read a lot, and I read about the Stoicism. I don't know if you're aware about that, but they were mentioning that the purpose of a person is the reason he or she exists. And this is very important. If you move away from our reason for being, less reason we have to continue to be. And this is what I foresee now. And
so
through that superhuman activity, I strongly advise leaders or managers to listen to their GPS so that your vehicle, your body will take you to the right destination. So before accessing the major highway of happiness, do not hesitate to take the ramp road of change while avoiding paying the toll of human suffering. This would be my main advice to CEO, male and female as well.
That's pretty impactful. Do you find it hard, though, Alan? Most people probably live in a state of denial, right? Even if they almost feel personally that they're burnt out, most will never admit it, especially senior executives.
No, you're right. And I was in the similar case as well. I was on the day-to-day working 80 hours, more than 80 hours per week. And my driver was the performance. I wanted to perform. And this is based also to our education, beliefs, personal values as well. Because when I analyze myself, I am very loyal to companies where I'm engaged to, and I have a strong belief Also, that sometimes you think, but I have to be strong, I have to perform, and these drive you to a certain situation, but yeah, you can go to a burnout stage.
One of the things that I'm fearful for, Alan, is many of the people that are listening to this podcast, they are type A, senior executives, or those that are coming up in the ranks and want to learn, the best and bright from the best and brightest that are out there. And they're all leaning forward. And I surmise that a majority of the folks in the audience are probably approaching or at a stage of burnout. And the reason that I bring this up is I think it's important that we listen to this podcast and to you in particular about recognizing these danger signs of burnout. And although the majority of what we're going to talk about today isn't about burnout itself, I think it's a fundamental thing to recognize so that people can take this step back and go, okay, I'm probably approaching this. I'm thinking about it in the wrong terms, and really listen closely to the things that we will talk about because they will help you in the future.
No, you're correct. Within Superhuman, we have seen and more people try to adapt your natural thinking and working style to fit expectation of others. And I was like that as well. So normally created by external drivers, work, career development, tension, stress. And keep in mind that normally the brain uses approximately 20% of the oxygen taken in through the lungs. So this leaves about 80% for the rest of the body, where it is utilized in the process of metabolism or in providing energy at the cellular level overall. So you imagine that if more and more oxygen is demanded by the brain because you try to adapt to the expectation of others, then you will have less and less available to keep the rest of the body up to speed. And you can have some different symptoms like chronic fatigue, memory impairment, up to burnout and depression. And this, it's a trigger point.
It's interesting. A lot of people, when they're rushing through trying to think through these things, we're probably going to talk a lot about mental resiliency and understanding the brain function and all of that stuff. And I think some people compartmentalize the fact that if you're talking about the brain, if you're talking about mental, they're thinking it is something that's on the shelf away from physicality, that the two aren't connected. Mental and physical are two different things. But what you just said is it is an absolute connection, that anything that we're talking about, the brain, it is a physical function. It absolutely affects you physically.
You're completely right. And today it's still very complex to diagnose or even acknowledge the burnout. Burnout is not well understood, and there is still no clear as well agreement in the medical world on how to tackle and treat it. Because, for example, in France, there is still no legislation that recognizes burnout as a work-related disease, despite the fact it's now so widely spread.
That is a fantastic point. It is true. I'm a military veteran, and I equate a lot of that even with post-traumatic stress about how long so many people suffered through that. And there's a small portion of PTS that you can equate to kind of burnout. And for years and years, no one really recognized the fact that these people are walking around, in a half sleep state, kind of zombies. And then once it was recognized that this is a real thing, then you can start to, acknowledge it and get, things, resources for it and all that. Whereas burnout is so high in the corporate world, but yet really isn't talked about. And, they just think they view it as a weakness, I guess is my point.
Yeah, exactly. It's as you were mentioning, but we are in a denying mode to a certain level until your body says stop. I cannot work under those conditions, and it's very difficult to survive and thrive in the very high changing world nowadays. And because more and more performance oriented or mindset is required nowadays, and this is a tough challenge for CEOs to adapt to that world.
Yeah, you bet. And so, Alan, you went through this. You went through your journey of unfortunately, the years and years of creating the burnout, but you recognized it. You finally took a step back. You realized you needed to find your purpose in life. You started to follow your GPS. And, you started to see the world in new eyes, and you started to educate yourself on what was causing burnout and how to overcome it from a leadership perspective too. Talk us through a little bit about what you started to discover and what journey did you go on to, really start to embrace things like neuroscience and things like that.
Now, first of all, I had to unlearn also what I learned in the past. And this was not easy, especially when you are a high executive. For every problem, you have a solution. This is
That's right.
operating mode, what you have. And I had to disconnect in order to reconnect better to myself. And it's a long process. Let's be honest. To unlearning beliefs, attitude, behaviors. It's very difficult, and you need to be accompanied by a specialist as well in order to drive the change that you need to go through. And it's a bit like what I was mentioning, renovating a house. There's stuff you need to tear down before you can start rebuilding, and you sometimes even need to get rid of a foundation and start all over again. And this is what I've been through as well during that period. And it takes time. People need to understand that burnout is not coming overnight, but it's not disappearing overnight as well. So you need to be patient with yourself and going through a process as well. That will help you to I would say, to recover from that situation and find a new purpose in life or a new sense in your life.
Do you find working with your clients and with senior executives that just as hard as it is to recognize burnout, is it very difficult for someone to let go? I can, that the term unlearning is fascinating to me, but I could imagine if you're a senior executive, you're probably saying, well, everything that I've acted like and done and performed up to this point has gotten me to this senior level. So it must be right, or at least pieces and parts of it must be right. So why would I give it all up? I can imagine that there is a strong sense of resistance. How do you get somebody over that hump?
You're completely right, and learning is a real challenge where most of us, we have learned and we have done so unconsciously things usually unaware of the mental models or behavioral patterns that we have created for ourselves. And it's very difficult to change that because they are our lifeblood, I would say. It's
Sure.
our mode of functioning, and we are often not even aware that it exists. And driving the change, it takes time. Changing habits, for example, it takes minimum 3 to 6 months. And first of all, you need to acknowledge. Secondly, you need to drive or work the plan in order to establish a change in your mindset or the way that you're driving your operation or your organization as well. But I would say it's a very important challenge to tackle, but it's necessary as well, because you can go straight to the wall if you don't do that.
So I'm sitting here imagining training for a marathon as you're talking. Like you can't just wake up and have never run in your life or just jog around the block occasionally and say, I'm going to run a marathon tomorrow. It takes time. It takes discipline to work out to a certain point to be able to accomplish that. And you're basically saying it's the same process to unlearn.
Yeah, it's exactly the same. It's a marathon, but my marathon in the past was a marathon without finish line. It was, and I went. So,
that's a great point.
and I was running, but without any steps to stop and to refresh as well, to recharge the battery as well. And this is very important. If you want to run a marathon, keep in mind that you have to refresh and recharge the battery time to time, because you cannot run 42K just like that. It's impossible.
That's right. That's right. That's a great way to put it. I'm going to steal that from you and use that as an example, because that is a fantastic way to think about it. So you started on this journey, and the very first thing you learned to do was disconnect from your bad habits. You started to unlearn, the process of unlearning. I love the analogy of sometimes when you have to remodel a house, you got to tear it all the way down to foundation and even replace the foundation in some circumstances to have that new kind of area of your life. So where did you discover this direct connection with neuroscience, understanding that there's different phases of the brain, different parts of the brain that make you think and act differently, that this was potentially the keys to the kingdom by unlocking things that we aren't aware of?
No, the journey that I've been through, first of all, when I was discussing with neuroscientists during my burnout stage, they were talking to me in a certain language that I did not understand. They were talking about amygdala, I've been overstimulated, your prefrontal cortex has been reduced or inhibited. And I was like, wow.
Yeah, what are these words?
Because I am a high senior executive leading companies, 500 people, driving performance and so on. And you are telling me that now my best friend, which is my brain, now cannot work and cannot support me anymore in my journey. And I was like, well, what's going on? And this is what I try to understand. So I work with the Neuro Leadership Institute of London to understand a little bit how the brain works. Okay, this connectivity between amygdala, prefrontal cortex, how is the decision-making process, how we work on that. Because my aim was clearly to recover from that burnout, to see if I can get this emotional intelligence recovered through a clear process on that extent. And this was very important. And I discovered a new passion, because for me it was neuroscience and neuro leadership is something that I love, and I try now to share my knowledge through Superhuman to leaders, organization as well, to adapt to this VUCA environment as well.
I think there's no doubt that as we enter this VUCA environment, as we've constantly been in a VUCA environment, but its intensity is like no other. And for those that are unfamiliar with VUCA as a term, it's volatile, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. That is the four terms for VUCA and what it stands for. It is interesting that almost all senior executives, Alan, no matter where they are on the globe, they have a certain level of, they've all gone to business school. They all have the same types of experiences as they've climbed the corporate ladders and all those trainings. So their education, their training, their experiences are very close to the same. So when they're looking for a competitive advantage, it is shocking to me that there is real science out there now that says in order to be your best self, it isn't going out and getting the latest new leadership development course. It isn't going out and just reading the next book on business, that they should potentially be looking in the mirror at themselves and realizing that they can unlock the power of their brain just if they start to begin to understand it. And like how your Superhuman organization works with them to do that.
No, yes. Unfortunately, I think the complexity of today disruption is we can foresee that we are stuck in I call it a left hemisphere dominated world. We are repeating the past over and over again, and we can foresee that we are not involved at the right level. And Einstein, for example, was saying that we cannot solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we use when we created them. And this is a powerful quote from him, and summarize very well the situation where we are today. And for example, Jim, we during the foundation of Superhuman, we have done a research with Accenture, which is a counseling company in France, and we could highlight that the majority, 89% of today's C-suite leaders, all business, code science, very left brain oriented skills like critical reasoning, decision making, or result orientation. And we can foresee that these are serve them well, and this capability will always be vital for them, but it's no longer sufficient, as you were mentioning, because leaders need cognitive, from my point of view, need cognitive flexibility as a new skill to complement the left brain with the power of the right brain in response to the change environment. And this is critical and imperative nowadays.
So, Alan, I want to make sure I heard you right that on this recent study from Accenture that you were involved with, 89% of senior leaders are operating kind of on the left side of their brain.
Correct. You're correct.
So in order to understand, well, what does even left side of the brain mean, even though you gave examples of like critical reasoning and effective decision-making, results orientation, can you run us through, and this will be hard in the podcast world, and I understand that, but can you run us through kind of what is the differences in the brain? And I believe that you even say there's actually 4 quadrants of the brain that we should kind of be aware of so that we can now start talking about getting out of left side thinking and becoming right side thinkers also.
No, clearly on the left side, you are very analytical, decision making, your result orientation, you like numbers, data, statistic. And on the right brain, you need more intuition, empathy, imagination, creativity. This is clearly the right brain skills, and this is what you need today in order to survive and thrive in the current VUCA world.
So are you saying you have discovered a way that if 89% of our senior leaders are left brain thinking, you have discovered a way to translate some teachings and some methodology into unlocking right brain power for left brain thinkers?
Yes, you're correct. We have developed a methodology and an assessment in order to help them, first of all, to understand what is your thinking style, your dominant thinking style. Okay? And then from this thinking style, we try to help them to develop through neuroplasticity the right brain level. So creativity, imagination, intuition through different exercise. So they might have some complex problems, operating problems on a day-to-day basis. And we try to take those problems and to readapt them in order to develop creativities and intuition and empathy as well, because this is critical for leaders nowadays.
So, Alan, in some of the services that I provide as a leader, I'm a coach to senior executives, and I perform personality assessments. I perform various personality assessments on senior executives. But when you do your methodology, are you inferring that when you say, we figure out how they think, that it's probably close, but is it different? Is it different than a personality assessment? So can you have a personality type of assessment, but still need to find out how you think and what quadrant of the brain you're coming from?
So what we do, our work and assessment system take a completely different approach to other thinking style assessment. And our main focus is measurement of the brain function and energy consumption in the brain. So understanding your own brain type before strengths and weaknesses are very helpful for self-development, managing relationship, managing teams, and generally being as fulfilled in life as we can be. So knowing your own strength gives you confidence to take on responsibility and project, and knowing your own weaknesses show where you need to seek help and advice for development. And our assessment can identify when people adapt their natural thinking and working style to fit expectation of others that we were talking about. It's the falsification type. And these we can identify as well during that assessment.
So that's an interesting thing. There's two key points that you just brought up that I think is important. So a lot of times when I deal with personality assessments, we know that your personality is baseline, that everybody has like a core primary function of their personality, but many become very self-aware, very mature of their personality strengths and weaknesses, and they overcome them and they kind of hide them. You're inferring that they could do that also in their thinking styles. They may be predominantly a certain thinking style, but may overcome that a little bit. But you're able to peel that back and really find out which side they're kind of thinking from.
You're correct, because every one of us has a dominant thinking style. It's where we are acting with what we call it the flow. Okay, so it's it's where your thoughts and action come from a place where it's naturally come to you. It's very easy to work, and you don't need to spend so much energy to do a task, for example. And our program have been developed to help executive as well to better understand the similarities and differences as well within their team, because enabling them to adjust, improve processes for better outcome as well. And this give them skills and tools to solve problems, address complex challenges, and communicate effectively with one another. And this is critical, because mainly when you foresee in your corporate life, the main challenges with your team is based on communication issue. So from the moment you can adapt yourself also to the thinking style of your team, then you can improve also the engagement and the performance of your team. And this is very important.
So when we another catchphrase that's out there quite a bit right now, that's been out there for years. Don't get me wrong, and it's not necessarily a catchphrase, but diversity and inclusion, right? So when we talk about classic diversity and inclusion, we're kind of talking about race, creed, color, religion, sex, all of kind of the kaleidoscope of things that make us who we are, and most people think of it in those diverse terms. Would you say that we should now start thinking from a diversity and inclusion perspective, also the way on which our primary areas of thinking is also?
We have seen a lot of companies, Jim, but we are company on the day to day doing a great job on diversity and inclusion, especially in gender, country of origin. But they are missing one thing: cognitive diversity. A high degree of cognitive diversity in your team could generate accelerated learning and performance in the face of new, uncertain, and complex situations that we are facing. And this is something very important. And we need to encourage people to reveal and deploy their different modes of thinking within the organization. And we need to make it safe to try things multiple ways. Because this can be a trigger point for us. Imagine one thing, Jim. Let's take an example. Okay, concrete example. Imagine if you and your boss have the same preference. The two of you will probably get along well if you see the world in the same way. In
Correct.
fact, you are likely to really appreciate your boss as a person, enjoying relating to him. But imagine that if your boss is hiring only people who think the way he thinks, there will be a problem.
There will be a big problem, without a doubt.
To the extent all job that we are doing in the corporate life are whole brain. There will be part of a job that nobody wants to do since it's outside of everyone's dominance.
It's so true. And it's, wow, Alan, I mean, like this is something that we should make sure that everybody is keenly aware of. This is a very important part of this discussion with you and I today, is that, there are many people that are just trying to be socially correct by creating this diverse group of people. But if they're diverse in all other ways, but are extreme left brain thinkers and left upper quadrant thinkers, you're still not getting where you're supposed to go, because this diversity and inclusion is all about having that diversity of thought. That's what's going to make you a high performing organization. There's no doubt about that.
I totally agree. And to overcome these challenges, I'm saying to all HR directors as well, make sure your recruitment process identify difference and recruit for cognitive diversity. Because when you face a new, uncertain, complex situation and everyone agrees on what to do, find someone who disagrees and cherish them. This is the most
Yes.
important.
So if I'm a senior executive, I'm listening to this podcast, I'm totally agreeing with you at this point, Alan, and I'm saying to myself, you've talked to me about unlearning. You've talked to me about there's a way to understand where I am thinking from. Is there a way to truly get somebody to learn new things, to be able to change the way that they start to think of things, to have instincts from another side of their brain be more predominant, all of that? Because most people, you've heard the phrase, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Most people are kind of like, I am who I am, Alan. I'm just am who I am. You can't change me. Can the brain continue to learn?
And it's quite funny because I had a question this morning from a CEO of a pharmaceutical organization, and he was asking me, "Do participant age can affect the outcome of Superhuman program?" So it means if I'm younger, I have more chance to perform in this program if I'm a senior executive. And I said to him that our human brain is considered to be highly dynamic and constantly reorganizing system capable of being shaped and reshaped across our entire lifespan. So it's believed that every experience alters the brain organization, can be physical and functional at the same level, and we call it neuroplasticity. But it's true that as we age, the rate of change in the brain or neuroplasticity changes can be made, but does not come to a halt. So for people who are new to leadership, it's important to know that some of the skills that you require can be developed with access to the right experience. And for those who have been in the leadership for some time, who might have developed some unhelpful habits in their leadership style, it's important to know that this can be changed with the right motivation and through repetitive practice over an extended period of time. This is the key of success, I would say.
So, Alan, for many years, for maybe even hundreds of years, the world of psychology was a little theoretical, right? They were done through theory, there was done through observation and study and all of those kind of things, but there still wasn't quite 100% proof that the brain functions in certain ways, acts in certain ways. But in the last 10 years, and probably the last 5 years in particular, that's changed, right? Functional MRIs are now seeing how the brain really functions and all that. So what you were saying this isn't something that's just theoretical. This is scientifically proven on how the brain functions.
No, you're completely right. And I think 10, 20 years ago, we didn't know how the brain is functioning, how the decision-making process was done. And nowadays we can understand how our brain works and what we can do to improve also our cognitive performance as well on a day-to-day basis. And it's still a journey, I would say. And we have not finished to understand how we work on the day-to-day basis.
So, Alan, if we're to a point now to where we can unlearn, to where we understand that our brain still learns and all of that, what does it look like if someone takes this and crosses over from a left brain thinker to a whole brain thinker and starts to embrace the right side? What does that look like from a leader's point of view? How does a person change? What does this new emerging leader kind of think and act, and how do they behave on this whole team concept now?
So clearly, we have seen with implementing the Superhuman program. First of all, that finding your thinking style can be very effective. First step in learning how you work best, and the benefit can be also for work related, but also at home, because for winning that and persevere in difficult tasks. So You will accelerate your learning and skill development. You will have brain protection through less arousal and leading to low level of cortisol, which is the stress hormone. You will feel motivated and believing there is no limit to your capacity for willpower. You will improve the quality of your sleep. Critical nowadays, revitalizing your battery life, I would say, and being more energetic, because this will increase as well your battery life. So this is very, very important. So this is more the benefit on the physical and mental benefit for symbiotic brain leader, but as well for the organization and for the company, because we are foreseeing that with the different organizations that we have supported right now, several key organizations um, have seen a positive bottom line impact and realized on average 22% higher revenue growth and 34% higher profitability growth. And
Wow.
employee engagement, the recent score that I've seen is 26%, and the turnover down by 18%. So it's quite tremendous.
It's kind of funny. When I talk to senior executives that are close to this burnout and where they're trying to just walking and working on autopilot, they talk about the fog. They're in a fog. They can't think clearly. They can't see clearly, metaphorically, and they're in a fog. And are you implying that, like, by just being like constantly in this left brain thinking cycle, that actually is that fog is kind of produced by using up more energy? Because you're saying if you're going whole brain, it actually reduces the amount of energy that you're kind of expending, and that therefore you're able to sleep better and be a better person and think more clearly. Has it got to do with that energy?
Exactly. And I would say as well that surviving and thriving in VUCA times doesn't mean becoming volatile, uncertain, complex, or ambiguous. What's required is just the opposite: vision, understanding, clarity, and agility. And we have adopted a VUCA mindset that doesn't lament about our chaotic times, but inspired leaders as a formidable challenge to cultivate their curiosity, courage, and willingness to change. And this is critical nowadays.
It's awesome. It's inspiring too, Alan, because what you're really challenging us all to embrace is the fact that we can see the world in a completely new lens, a lens that it's designed to be seen in, just by the way that we change, or the awareness really on how we think and act. It's an amazing process to even have this conversation and realize how stuck in our thinking ways we have been as a human race. We've just kind of been caught up in this. This isn't just a business leader discussion, but now through experts like you, we're able to unlock true potential.
And I foresee as well that nowadays change is inevitable, and there are usually two choices, Jim: change or be changed. This
So
not
true.
scripted. It's really up to us what choice we want to make to survive and thrive in this VUCA world.
It's so true. And for you to just turn VUCA, that acronym, up on its head and just talk about vision and understanding and clarity and agility, VUCA was such an ominous word, right? Everybody's afraid of, they use VUCA as the enemy. And now you can change VUCA for inspiration. Incredible stuff. There's no doubt that, you've really challenged us to be more resilient, more creative, more flexible in all of these things, from the business environment to the personal environment. And this is the type of things that the Iron Sharpens Iron movement tries to get after, is the very fact that there are people like you out there in the world that understand, to be a better leader, you've got to think differently than how we've thought in the past. And the future is bright. There's no doubt. And, Alan, I'd love for you, as we come up towards the end of this podcast, to provide us with one last bit of inspiration, one last thought that you may have for our listeners out there about how to embrace and the importance of whole brain thinking.
Yeah, it's been clearly during my painful journey, I learned a lot. And what I was saying to the different leaders, don't worry, the burnout, I've done it for you, so you don't have to do it. And this is something very important as well to share with the different leaders as well. But for me, the main recommendation that I would like to share to a different CEOs, for organization, the world condition certainly require adjustment at the individual level, team level, organizational level, and it requires leader who has a change mentality. I call it the symbiotic brain leader, with his cognitive flexibility, as we discussed during this podcast. But remember that symbiotic brain leaders change people from within themselves, not by ways of transactions. And this is necessary for an organization today to be led by a unique individual who possesses this leadership characteristic. And symbiotic brain leaders need to realize the importance of having cognitive flexibility in dealing with challenges in this new era. And to nurture and strengthen cognitive flexibility in current leaders, we are ready as Superhuman to assist and support all the leaders worldwide on that extent in order to survive and thrive. And this is our main purpose as well.
Well, Alan, I think you have taught us all today to embrace that superhuman mindset. There's no doubt that I think I already am going to entitle this podcast Survive and Thrive, because you've completely unmasked our way to do that and the secrets and the tips and the tricks to do it. And I'll leave you with one last inspiration that I actually got from you, Alan, and it was a quote that you have on your website from Einstein. And it completely makes sense to me now. And that he says that logic will get you from A to B, but imagination will take you everywhere. So powerful, so relevant, and it absolutely is you are in the Superhuman organization is the right environment for leaders to take themselves to the next level. So thanks again, Alan, for your time today.
Thank you very much, Jim. And I really hope your followers and listeners could get a little bit more understanding about Superhuman, but also about the benefit of the neural leadership as well. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining our leadership movement this week. Talking to Alan about whole brain leading and the power of unlearning was my key takeaway for sure. Don't forget about show notes posted on the website with key leader takeaways. Be sure to subscribe and tell a friend so that we can continue to build the tribe. Until next time, remember that iron sharpens iron. Make yourself and others around you better every single day.